My name is Jason Boyle. Travel is always a timely topic, but it's particularly timely right now. I am class of 97. I've been back at Texas A&M since 2000. I've had roles with recreational sports, student activities, contract administration, and for the last 5 or so years, I've been in this role in the Division of Risk Ethics and Compliance. So in my role, I'm responsible for all of A&M's insurance programs, as well as reviewing contractual insurance requirements, advising on all things risk management, and I supervise our youth programs staff. And so anytime youth are coming to campus, I supervise the individuals who help to facilitate that. I think most applicable to our conversation today, I assumed I was given the opportunity to review all travel at the height of COVID when travel was suspended. It included domestic and international. And then as restrictions were lifted, I was asked to maintain a role with all international travel. And so myself and my coworker, Grace Mullendor, we receive all international travel requests that are submitted into Concur for Galveston, and also for the HSC. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tressie. Let her introduce herself.
My name is Tressie, and I am class of 93. I was a teacher for a long time, and now I've been at A&M for the last 6 years. I'm one of the people in this office that reviews travel. My colleague, McKaylee, helps with that also. I also look at research contracts and help with visiting scholars and do a number of things in this office. We're so glad that you joined us today, and we hope that our presentation helps you with your international travel question. As a general disclaimer, we do want to, put out there that we encourage international activities. Our office is not meant to stifle anyone or keep people from interacting with the international community. We definitely want to help you with this process. And so in general, that is what we're here for.
And we do receive quite a lot of questions about the Concur process. I know it feels like whenever you submit the request, it often is just floating around in the ether. No one knows what's happening. And so we really wanted to spend some time today talking about that approval process. And I think to start, it's important to really emphasize why we use Concur. It is obviously the platform that's used by Texas A&M, and I believe across the system. And one of the key components of it is that it helps us with compliance with A&M rules, with system regulations and policies, as well as conflict of interest and a number of federal and state laws. A couple I do want to pinpoint and highlight would be the foreign travel rule, which things to point out in there. I think if you have questions and are ever wondering why we're doing certain things, that's a great place to start. The foreign travel rule does stipulate that all foreign travel must be approved in advance, so prior to departure. It also puts responsibility on the department and the traveler for checking the international travel advisory list, which we'll talk about a little bit more here in a minute. It stipulates that the student travel rule governs all student travel, also something we'll hit on in a minute, and it highlights the need to follow all export controls guidance. I wanted to also point out the Division of Finance and Business Services, their disbursement manual. They have that link that's right there. That link actually goes to the international travel guidelines. And there are two key points in there that I hope y'all will keep in mind. One is that all approval for international travel is coordinated through Concur. And so that's one of the main reasons we use Concur, is that is how we track everything that is occurring internationally from a travel standpoint. The other key piece in that is that department head approval is required. I don't pretend to know the inner workings of Concur and what it does automatically and what it does not do automatically. But I would ask that as you are reviewing your Concur requests, when they are initially submitted, be sure that your department head is included in that routing. The other, and I think equally, if not more important piece of it, is we use Concur because of who we are as an institution, regularly referred to as the Aggie family, because we care about our people. right? We care about those we educate, we care about those we serve, we care about those who are involved in our research projects. And so Concur enables us to do a lot of things just from a general wellness and care standpoint. The proactive planning that goes into it, it forces us to think ahead about why we're going, what we're going to be doing. It requires us to complete train track, and so that gives us a baseline of education so that we're aware, have some knowledge before just jumping on a plane and flying abroad. And then this emergency response at the bottom there, I can't tell you how important that is. It's been highlighted twice recently in the last 2 weeks. There was a typhoon that was approaching Japan, and we had 6 people in Japan at the time. And so I was quickly able to get into Concur, look to see who's there, check in with them. And every single one said, no, I'm in a safe area. It's not coming to me, but at least we knew. If they were in an area that was going to be impacted, then we could have connected with resources, tracked to make sure that they were safe and that they're progressing and everything else. And so the other one is Israel. We had one individual who was in Israel at the time. Everything happened over the weekend. And that individual we were able to get in touch with and found out that they got back to Houston safely. And so again, it helped us really understand who we have, where they are, or who is where, and any kind of resources that may be needed enables us to get them those. So our questions tend to focus around the approval process itself. And so that's where we're going to spend the bulk of our time this morning. Now, Tracy, she asked me to map it out as visual reference so that y'all could print something off and put it on your boards and keep track of it. And this is what I came up with. It's really confusing. I'll be honest, I don't remember this at all. It starts somewhere in the middle. It really is. I empathize with the confusion. I empathize with the uncertainty. I get it. It's a confusing process, particularly when you're not in it every day. I know it feels like your request is just sitting out there somewhere. I hope when we're done today, you'll understand that each of these steps is important. We each take our responsibilities we put a lot of stress into our responsibilities, make sure that we're doing them completely and correctly and with consideration and care. And so we are prioritizing things to the best of our ability. I do promise that. So here's what we came up with is a way to try to simplify the process and try to give you a visual representation. A few things to understand. The first is that this is picking up after everything has gone through your departmental and college processes. So anything you have internally is not reflected on here. And so where it says request submitted down to that travel advisory list up in the top left corner, there are things happening in that arrow that we can't capture. Those are things that you would determine and that are automatically occurring within Concur. The other thing is that this applies to all 02, 10, and 23 adlocks and to students. And so from a student perspective, I want to point out that this is not for your traditional study abroad programs. And so when students you have faculty-led programs going abroad for a period of time, and you're working directly with education abroad, going through the process to get those approved, that's not what we're referring to. This is really about the more independent, short-term request in which A&M is providing some sort of resources. And so it is being registered within Concur. Okay, so all 02, 10, 23 adlocks and students. The other thing is that each of the 4 and 1, 4 and 2, 4 and 3, 4 and 4, those are often referred to as desks, and they are stops within the approval process. They are sequential, right? So they're generally sequential. It goes from 1 to 2 and then to 3 to 4 as needed, but they are not mutually exclusive. And so, for example, if it goes from 1 to 2 and 2 finds something that say, well, this trip can't occur because of X, Y, and Z, 4 and 2 has the ability to send it back to the employee to not approve the request, whatever that may be. So just because you see a notice that 4 and 1 has approved your request, it does not mean that the trip is done. There are other steps that have to be completed, and so we're hoping that you will see that today. The other thing I wanted to point out is I looked yesterday, and from January 1st to yesterday, we had 3,500 plus requests that we had reviewed and approved within Concur. Each of these desks that we're talking about has 1 to, I think the max is 3 people who are looking at these requests on top of everything else that they're doing. And so please know that we appreciate any grace, any patience, any understanding that you can give us, that we are trying to prioritize these. We're giving it our best effort. I promise you it's not just sitting there. And what I think you'll see after today is that each of us has some very specific things that we are looking at. And so it does take us a little bit of time to do that. Last thing to note on this slide is that the approval, once it does go all the way through, approval is based on that point in time. And so Israel is a great example. We may have had some travel that was approved to occur to Israel, and then something happened, and now we're reassessing whether travel should occur to Israel, right? And so just be aware that we're talking about in that point of time, but at any point after that date between, submission, approval, and departure, at any point it may come back and be reassessed. So starting with the first step, this international travel advisory list that is issued by the A&M system, it really helps to determine the first stop in the routing process. And so if a country is on that list, it goes to A&M system risk management along with the required international travel questionnaire. If it's not on the list, then it will go automatically to 4 and 1. Real quickly about this advisory list, it's developed by Focus Point. So System Risk Management contracts with Focus Point International to develop this, and they do so on a weekly basis in consultation with System Risk Management. It is updated every Monday morning. We did get them this year to have a consistent link that we could provide. And so the link that's there, anytime you click on it, that will be the active as of that date list. The countries themselves, so if you look at all of the countries that are listed there, the extreme and the high risk countries, every single country listed there is loaded into Concur, and it's based on the country, not necessarily a specific region. That'll be important in a little bit, but know that those countries, once they're loaded into Concur, they require the questionnaire, and it automatically routes over to systems so that they can do an initial review. So they'll review it based on the health and safety risks, but they also take into consideration the ability to provide resources and what the impact may be on the system-wide insurance programs such as workers' comp, CISI, etc. One other thing to note is you may see an email that says system risk management does not approve this at travel, etc., etc., etc. But the email will still say it was approved at that desk. The only way for us to advance requests within Concur is to approve them. And so you may see approved, but it doesn't always mean that we are recommending approval. It's just the only way that we have to advance it through the process. Okay, so once it is done at System Risk Management, or if it's not on the list, it comes to my office. And so this is where myself and Grace Mullendor look at the requests. Our role is really to conduct a risk assessment and then to determine who else needs to review the request or needs to have that information within the process. And so we are looking to manually add in the appropriate export controls to determine whether it needs to go to education abroad and to determine whether it has to go to the Office of President for final approval based on the criteria. I do want to note, much like Tressie said, we view risk management as a tool of empowerment. So we believe that a proper risk management helps us to accomplish more things as safely and successfully as possible. And our goal is to force stop so that we have to take some time to critically think about what we're doing, and also to make sure that we're arming the people who are taking the trip and who are traveling and who are doing all these important things, arm them with the information that they need so that they can make a good risk-informed decision. So the way that we do that is to look at where people are going, what they're doing, and who's traveling. Now, this is a weird order. Normally you say like who, what, where, right? But this is how we scan the screen because of how it's presented within Origami. And so each of these is important, right? Each of these is important from a risk standpoint. It's also important for a routing standpoint because it determines who needs to see the information. So as we start talking about destinations, we like seeing these from a risk management standpoint. We like seeing these destinations because they tend to not need a bunch of follow-up, a bunch of resources. Typically, people go to these countries and have a tremendous experience. Not saying they don't everywhere else, but these are the countries that when you go there, they pose low health and safety risks. Typically, I believe, low export control risks. And so we don't do a bunch of follow-up in full transparency. We don't do a bunch of follow-up with travelers to these locations. These medium to high risk destinations honestly become the most challenging. And so the maps that I'm providing here are actually pulled from the advisory list. And what you start to see is that Mexico, Ethiopia, and Colombia, for example, are all listed as countries on that list. However, there are regions within each of those countries that are higher risk or lower risk, just depending on the situation in those areas. There are a number of others that I'll be honest are equally challenging. There are destinations that are not on the travel advisory list that we still take a look at. If you consider most of South America and Africa, for example, Brazil is a great example. Brazil as a country is listed as a moderate risk, but there are some locations within Brazil that start to lean toward the high to even extreme risk based on potential activities, the traveler's awareness and familiarity, etc. And so we will look at all destinations and start to ask our questions right then and there as to whether we need to talk with the traveler. Is it enough for us just to provide information about the location that they're going to via email, maybe a quick Zoom or a phone call, something like that? I do want to point out the next slide here. I want to take a minute, and I may need to crowdsource a little bit. I'm always amazed how few people know about the CISI resources. What you see on the left are employee benefits that are available to every single one of us when we're traveling abroad on Texas A&M business. And so they include things like emergency medical evacuation, security evacuation, emergency medical reunion. So if you have to be put into a hospital because of a serious medical condition, there are funds available. The CISI will get family members over there to help take care of you. Repatriation in case of, heaven forbid, someone passes away when they're abroad. And then the team assist plan. These are the things that are easy to access. They're not automatically included from a cost standpoint. There may still be some out-of-pocket costs, but if you were to lose your passport, your ID, if you were to have your wallet stolen, whatever it may be, and to contact CISI, they could assist our travelers, you, whoever that may be, with the recovery. The other piece that I wanted to highlight on here are those additional benefits listed on the right side of the screen. We all have Blue Cross Blue Shield benefits, health insurance benefits as employees, and those offer worldwide benefits. It's important to know that if you're traveling abroad, let's say into Mexico, wherever that may be, and they have hospitals that will take Blue Cross Blue Shield, you still are responsible for your out-of-pocket deductibles, any copays, whatever that may be. CISI offers optional accident and sickness insurance that has no deductible. It is guaranteed to work abroad. They will work directly with the providers, and so it takes our traveler out of the situation in terms of trying to negotiate with whoever that may be. You're working directly with with Blue Cross Blue Shield. It also has some trip delay and trip interruption benefits, and as well as some quarantine. That was really important during COVID timeframe. Wanted to note that those additional benefits, employees need to opt into those. Those are not automatic. And so often I will send self-enrollment instructions. It's a minimal cost. It's $1.61 to $1.81 per day, depending on where you're going. I'll send self-enrollment instructions as people are interested, or if they're going to a high-risk destination that I've talked with them about, so that you can enroll in those things. Now, the other piece of this is that Education Abroad enrolls students into this coverage, and they have all of the benefits listed automatically, but they have to be registered through Education Abroad. And so that is part of the reason that we route all student requests over to Education Abroad, is to ensure that those are there. So from a crowdsourcing standpoint, if anybody has ideas, how we can get this information out to people, please email me, because I don't know how to get it out. They provide so many wonderful resources. They're really, really good to work with. And I just think that people aren't aware of it, and I don't know how to get the information out. So send me an email if you have any good ideas. From a destination standpoint, the last thing to talk about would be these extreme risk areas. Those were at the top of the list on the advisory list that you saw. It's a very similar approach in terms of those moderate to high risk, with the difference being that we're going much more in depth. I will tell you straight up, if you're going to one of these countries, expect a phone call from me. Expect me to reach out and to ask to meet with you. I am going to challenge the need to go versus any other options, not because I think you're just, haphazardly making decisions, but in these situations, I really, really, really want to make sure that we're asking the right questions and we're truly doing it based on the purpose of the travel. I am a believer in the "what if I'm wrong" approach to risk management. And so I stop and ask myself that all the time. And I will often ask travelers the same question: what if you're wrong? I understand you may be from the country. I understand that you may know the language and that you understand the culture. And you've been there a number of times with no issues, but what if you're wrong this time? What are the resources available? How do you get out? What's your emergency plan, etc.? So I share that to say that these destinations, it's possible to go to them, but it is not a guarantee. And these are these countries in particular, 100%. If you're going, you will see 4 and 4 required in that routing for final approval, because they have that authority. The where is certainly important. The next piece would be the activities that are included on the actual trip. As we're considering the activities, these are some of the things that we look at 4 and 1. I want to talk for a minute about the first tab there, this travel, and how they're getting to and from your final destination, as well as the need to potentially travel within a country. And I like to use examples. I wish I could just tell stories all the time, but I'm going to talk about a research center that we have down in Calnali, Mexico. It's in the state of Hidalgo down there, see it at the bottom. We have a department that works very, very closely with that research center, has done some amazing biological work and discovered some species of fish in a river, and it's a really cool project. When I first started reviewing international travel, they submitted this to me, and it was one of the early ones that I had to review from a high-risk standpoint. Obviously, the preferred method for getting down there would be to fly, right? So a flight from College Station, somehow get to Mexico City, and then take a little shuttle, transport, whatever it may be, to get up to the center. And you're in the low-risk area of Mexico the entire time, which would be outstanding. Unfortunately, this department had a need to drive. And so they needed to drive down to Hidalgo, down to Canali, because they had research equipment, they had samples that they had to take back and forth. And so the first thing we started talking about was, okay, insurance has very specific auto liability requirements. And so we got that taken care of. The next thing we immediately started looking at is the route. And this is the most direct route, driving right through Tamaulipas, which our international security advisor does not designate countries or regions as extreme risk lightly. They don't just haphazardly do that. There's a reason that those countries and those areas are noted that way. And so when I saw this, they had some grad students that were going down with them, as well as some employees. And I said, well, let's talk about, are there other routes so we're not traveling right through Tamaulipas? And we came up with this. Still not ideal, right? But it was a better option. And what this enabled us to do is really look closely at the itinerary, figure out their driving time, so that they were only driving during daylight hours. They're traveling along a federal highway, a federal tollway down in Mexico that had a whole lot of gas station options. We discussed prearranged stops for overnight. So they stayed in Monterrey, which is a nice area, a lot of expats there. And so I share this to say, it's not just based on the country, even though it may feel that way at times. And we really are looking closely at what other options there may be. We understand the need to do things. We understand the desire to do things. We want to make sure that it's done as safely as possible, quite frankly. And so we're willing to work with everybody to figure out a creative way to do that. The other things that we really look closely at as part of our risk assessment would be, how are you getting around while you're in country? What's the safest method of travel? Is it Uber, Lyft versus taxis? If it is a taxi, you coordinate it? Do you just hail it off the side of the road, coordinate it in advance? If you're driving, are you experienced? Who's driving? I mean, we look at all those things in terms of just getting around. The lodging, in terms of this, let's use this Cal Research Center, for example. The lodging has a close relationship with Texas A&M. It does have shared shower and restroom facilities. So that was one of the things we talked about from a Title IX standpoint. If it's not something that we have a close relationship with, if you are just staying at a hotel, how did you select that? What area is it in? What's the safety in the area that you're going to be staying? Is it a secure hotel if it's going into one of those high-risk areas? Those kind of things are all considered. The planned activities, this can be the most challenging at times, in addition to the free time. We don't even talk about that too much, but the planned activities can be challenging, and this is where we really ask for some details. We see everything from conference attendance, conference presentations, to collaborations, to air quotes field work. And in this case, the field work included collecting fish samples. And that sounds, innocuous enough, but really what that involved was hiking down a river embankment. And so they had to hike down this river embankment. It was a steep river embankment. They'd had people fall and get injured before. And so it's really providing that level of detail to say, okay, these are the risks that we are taking on, and we understand those exist, but these are the things we're also doing to try to mitigate them. Free time, I just want to quickly point out, I understand the need of free time. You can't be abroad and only be on business all the time. I understand the need to have free time. Please take some time to critically think about what that looks like, how it impacts your travel. So all this to say, please provide details up front. Lastly, the thing we're talking about here would be who is traveling. From a risk standpoint, the status is important, right? So there's a difference between a 20-year-old undergrad versus a tenured faculty. Those experiences, the assumed experiences, are not the same. The way their brains process information is not the same. Risk versus reward. And so from a risk standpoint, that's certainly important. What resources they have available, also important. And so we want to make sure everyone understands that. And then the steps that we take and how thorough those are to make sure that they're prepared, armed with information, all of that is also different based on that status. The status piece also determines the additional routing, as I mentioned. And so students and employees with students all are routed to education abroad. The departments that are listed there, we work closely with TEAS, AgriLife, and obviously with Tressie and Export Controls to determine which Export Controls office needs to review the request based on their department, not necessarily the employees. Not necessarily the funding. So it's how the employee is ad-locked. And so we have a list of departments that we send to different agencies, and everybody else goes to the 4 and 2 with Tressie. But if you see an email, if you see a request that goes from 4 and 1 to 4 and 2, and then all of a sudden it's going over to AgriLife or TEAS 4 and 1, that means that Grace and I did something goofy and there's something we weren't aware of. And so that was on us. And that fortunately, we know that Export Controls has a good relationship and they're interacting with each other and correcting us as needed. Okay, so with that, once we are all complete on our end, and that was a lot of information, I understand. Once we're complete on our end, we forward it on to Desk 2, which is Tressie, and I'm going to let her take it. There she is.
Thank you so much. Welcome to 4 and 2. Our office receives a notification from Concur at the point of request creation. So going back to what Jason said at the very beginning, there are a lot of other activities that go on besides what is just on this flow chart. As soon as the request is put into Concur, even if it has not been submitted yet, we see it. We are seeing all departments that are 02, 10, 23. So even AgriLife and TEAS requests do come to us and we see all of them. The flowchart indicates our spot in the routing and in the approval process, but we start our review as soon as we receive the notification. So we want to make sure that we're expediting travel, not holding up the process, and we look at requests from the start. We also take into account the destination, activities, and travelers, but we look at them through a little bit different lens. We review on a risk-based model, just like Jason, and each request is evaluated individually. So, for example, travel to attend a conference in Canada poses a lot lower risk than presenting at a conference in a country of concern. And when we need more information to make our determination, we reach out directly to the traveler. But there is a checklist on our website that can be used by travelers to help them decide whether they should reach out to us proactively. Okay, So when we receive the travel requests, we have to keep in mind several things. I'm going to go into each one of these a little more in depth in the coming slides, but to begin, there are overarching federal laws related to export controls and imposed economic sanctions. We also have guidance coming in the form of NSPM 33. And then there are system and university regulations and rules, sponsor guidelines, and rules regarding conflicts of interest and conflict of commitment that our office helps to oversee. We move between the travel requests coming through Concur, the sponsored research information in Maestro, and then disclosure information in Huron. It's a lot to keep up with, and we're here to help travelers. This session is not meant to be a deep educational briefing on export controls, but I do want to provide you with just a summary. The U.S. Department of Commerce oversees the Bureau of Industry and Security, which controls the Export Administration regulations. Then the U.S. Department of State oversees the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, which implements the International Traffic in Arms regulations. These regulations determine the level of risks that is associated with the export of items and technology. So that's the big federal level that we have to consider. I also mentioned National Security Presidential Memorandum 33 earlier. We're not exactly sure how this is going to affect our travel reviews, but it declares that research institutions receiving more than $50 million in federal science and engineering support in the prior 2 fiscal years must establish a research security program that includes the 4 elements on the slide. We already have really strong policies and are likely doing most of what will be included in the requirements, but we have not gotten the final word on them yet. So this is something else that we're considering. And now we move from the federal level into system requirements. System Regulation 150504 became effective August 18th, 2022, and then the university rule was implemented April the 6th, 2023. As a result, all high-risk global engagements and high-risk international collaborations require additional review and approval. So our office will escalate these travel requests through the VPR to the System Research Security Office, where additional review will take place. The Office of General Counsel is included, and ultimately the Vice Chancellor for Research. This review process can result in approval with mitigations, or denial. Additionally, there have been denials based on a lack of time to review, so please be sure to submit these type of requests in plenty of time. Export control training must be completed as part of this process, and we recommend that everybody take it anyway, but we will assign it if you are going to a country of a concern, and it should be completed before your travel. So now that we have all of the big rules that we have to follow, we start looking at the specifics of the request. And so the first things that we take into consideration is the destination. There are 2 groups of countries that we pay particular attention to: the U.S. Department of Treasury, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, known as OFAC, implements economic sanctions that affect travel. So if you are requesting travel to an embargoed country, there are additional requirements and possible licenses that are needed. Right now, we're not allowing travel to Russia in accordance with the Chancellor's guidance. And I've never received a request to travel to North Korea, but please reach out to our office well ahead of your departure date if you are planning to travel to a country with embargoes. I touched on System Regulation 150504 already, but I want to emphasize that the review of travel to these countries does take longer than other destinations because of the additional system level reviews and approvals. And also please keep in mind that these lists can change at any time. So the next thing that we look at is the planned activity. In Concur, this is stated as the purpose. We ask that you be as clear as possible about what you will be doing during your travel. We need to know a little more information than just you're going to a conference or you're going to be collaborating, and providing a good description of the plan is very helpful to us. These are just a few of the examples of things that people do when they travel. The bullet points are just meant to serve as a basic guide for what we're reviewing, but we consider each request on a case-by-case basis. As the Export Controls Office, we're always concerned with physical exports. So anyone who's taking something out of the United States is exporting. This covers a vast amount of items, and anytime you are taking equipment with you, we need to know ahead of time so that we can assist in determining what actions are needed. Even if there are no licenses required and the item does not fall under export controls per se, there could be additional paperwork required to document the export properly. So please work with our office early on in the planning. We also review collaborations carefully. This is essentially an export of information. So part of our due diligence is to screen both the individuals and their institutional affiliations using a program called Visual Compliance. These screenings help to ensure that these parties are not on any of the government's restricted party lists that would prohibit us from doing business with them or require additional licensing. If you are traveling to visit collaborators, please include that information in your request to help speed up the process. Conference presentations and speaking engagements are another type of information export. Most travel for scholarly work falls under an exclusion to the export control regulations. And the three main exclusions are the fundamental research exclusion, the educational information exclusion, and the public information exclusion. Very briefly again, because this is not an export controls presentation, but if it is fundamental research, then it is probably going to be published. There's a little more that goes into it to make that determination, but that is a general guideline that we use. Educational information is information that is in a course, academically presented, and then public information is information that has already been published in a journal, presented at a conference, that kind of thing. When we're conducting our review, we're essentially gathering enough information to make a determination to see if there is sufficient substantiation to apply one of these exclusions. And if so, then we can easily approve the travel. But if not, then we'll work with the travelers to mitigate any of these issues. It's rare that we would deny travel, but it could happen if there were no way to maintain compliance. We are most often asked about taking computers and other electronic devices out of the country, so I've prepared a few slides specific to that topic. Most standard off-the-shelf computers do not pose an export control concern. However, there are other rules that apply. We have always recommended taking a loaner laptop, and the university has recently come up with some guidance related to loaners. They are now being required if you are traveling to a country of concern. You will need to work with your IT department to make those arrangements. The next couple of slides come straight from IT, and I don't want to read them to you, but to hit the highlights, we understand that traveling with devices is almost a given. We all carry our phones with us. We rely heavily on this technology, but there are some stipulations, and so we really highly encourage you to work with your departmental IT before you take anything out of the country. And as I mentioned, while the computer itself might not be export controlled, some of the information that it contains may be. And so we need to evaluate this. Please let us know if you think you might have something on a device that needs additional review. And the last thing is that about computers is that we usually recommend the use of VPN, but there are country-specific laws that we have to follow, and so we suggest that you work with your departmental IT, depending on the country that you're going to figure out the best way to access information that you need. Okay, the final thing that we take into consideration is the individual doing the traveling. So this is where we look into other systems like Maestro and Huron to get a bigger picture. During this portion of the review, we're going to gather information related to ongoing projects and collaborations. We check formal agreements to confirm whether there are any restrictions in place related to the sharing of information. When traveling related to a sponsored award, if you'll include that information in the travel purpose, we can more easily reference the review of any agreement and connect the two activities. We also review for disclosure of international collaborations in Maestro and Huron. And often travel reviews overlap with other reviews that we've conducted. And so when we can make that connection, it helps to speed up the process. There are a couple of activities that are specific to travel that are part of the disclosure process in Huron. This slide is directly from our website. Specifically, travel expenses that are reimbursed will need to be reported on your disclosure, and you must submit a pre-approval request when you're traveling to a country of concern. There are many other activities that require disclosure or PAR creation, but often these activities overlap or happen while you are traveling internationally. So we look at these from both sides. Our website has a very handy list of all the things that must be disclosed, but we're happy to help with this process if you have any questions. So to wrap up, once we have determined that there are no export control concerns and we've verified that all federal laws, system regulations, university rules are all being met, then we're happy to consider our review complete. And unless there are extenuating circumstances, our goal is to be ready to click approve once the request arrives in the 402 queue in Concur.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Tressie. So once Tressie's review is complete, if students are involved, you will see the requests go to 4 and 3. 4 and 3 is education abroad, and it is required that all students who are traveling for A&M purposes are registered through education abroad. When should we register? Again, anytime it's an A&M Galveston student who is traveling abroad should be registered through education abroad. And if A&M is providing any resources, and so we will have students who travel abroad to do research, to present at a conference, and A&M may be providing some funding to help with that. Those students should also be registered through Concur, even though they're traveling independently, quote unquote. We will make sure on our side that education abroad is aware by routing the Concur request to them, but anything that you can do to get them to register in advance will certainly help to expedite their process, their review process on their end. As an example, we had a PhD student who was accompanying some employees to Mexico for a potential partnership that's coming up here pretty soon, and it's really actually awesome. So that department is paying part of her travel expenses. She's also doing some research while she's there as part of her dissertation, and so that student has registered with education abroad. And what that enables is that she will complete some pre-departure training, so it helps with that educational component, the preparation component, proactive planning. Most importantly, and I can't stress this enough, the professionals who are in education abroad provide some vital emergency and assistance services. I cannot imagine doing their work. They have 24/7 emergency phone line. They've helped students who are in all levels of crisis, whether it's anything from I lost my ID, I missed my flight, to mental health emergencies. I can speak from experience. When I was on our critical response team years ago, I was called in the middle of the night because a student was in Russia and he was mugged, beaten very badly to the point that he had to have facial reconstruction surgery. And so I worked with education abroad. They connected with CISI to get all the resources to get him transported as needed, to coordinate his family getting over there to help take care of him. All of that is only possible, or most efficiently possible, I'll say it that way. All of that is most efficiently possible and coordinated when students are registered and they are aware that they're on location and that they have been registered with CISI and have access to all those benefits. We included the steps there for how do I register. You may see emails from me or from Grace that say, please go in and take these steps. If you have questions, I don't work in VIA, which is their system for registration. I don't work in that system, but if you have any questions, their contact information is there, and they're happy to answer those. So last but not least, if you're going to one of those high-risk regions within a high-risk country, the request will go to 4 and 4. Per university rules, that is a requirement. And so the Office of the President, they have a designee who is given the authority to say, yes, the trip will happen, or no, it will not. And so all of these other steps will take place. There will be a recommendation for or against approval in that request, and it will route to 4 and 4. I can tell you also from experience that the individual who's in this role reviews every single piece of information that is included with that request. He actually emailed me yesterday because we had a PhD student going to Karachi, Pakistan, and on her questionnaire, she put her method of travel in country was a rental car. And I had met with her, had a whole discussion about what that actually meant. That was not her plan, but I forgot to address that in my notes. that I sent forward. And he emailed me yesterday and said, hey, I just got this request. I noticed that they're renting a car in Karachi. Did you have a conversation with them? I'm assuming so, since you forwarded the request, but I wanted to make sure. And so those little details he's catching. And so I promise you, again, as much as Tressie and I are emphasizing, please be detailed. And as much as we are trying to highlight this is why we reach out, I can't overemphasize the fact that he will review those things because, again, we want to make risk-informed and appropriate and purposeful and intentional decisions.
So the title of our presentation was, included the fact that we were going to give you some tips. So we have broken them down into 3 main categories. And the first one is plan ahead. We can't stress this enough. You need to be familiar with all of the requirements that are involved with the resources that are available. Even if it's a familiar location to you, you need to know as much as you can about where you're going. We suggest that you submit your Concur request sooner rather than later. Take the trainings and then work with the applicable offices as soon as you can. We also recommend that you pack with a purpose. Provide as much information as possible in your Concur request. That helps all of us, each desk, make the determinations quicker and more expediently. When you are talking about taking items, physical items out of the country, if you don't really need it out of the country, don't take it with you. And then finally, share only information that's already publicly available when you're out of the country. If you've done all of these things, then you should be able to just sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
This is a list of some of the resources that we know.